The Square Deal by Lincoln Luce, Adam Peters, Josh Sanner, Vance Tompkins, and Timmy Tung. Our topic is number 5. Evaluate the 3 C's of the Square Deal and the impact each one had on life in America. Although big businesses still held immense power after the Progressive Era, businesses and labor were more protected under the New Deal by the control of corporations minimizing monopolies, the conservation of natural resources through the United States Forest Service, and protecting the consumers through legislation that improved hygiene and safety. In 1902, President Theodore Roosevelt introduced his domestic program, which emphasized the conservation of natural resources, control of corporations, and consumer protection. Among its accomplishments, this program helped the middle class by attacking powerful trusts and monopolies. Roosevelt also created a new Department of Commerce and Labor and managed to quell a number of labor strikes. Control of corporations. The common people were very critical of the unethical practices of the robber barons who headed the big businesses and corporations. These businesses and corporations accumulated vast profits operating in an economic system of free enterprise and laissez-faire, and were free of state and federal control regulations. Roosevelt's progressive ideas were put on display with the anthracite coal strike of 1902, when he summoned mine owners in the Union to Washington to discuss the situation, advocating conciliation and arbitration. If the mine owners refused to compromise, he threatened to seize mines and operate them with federal troops. The policy continued with Roosevelt's trust-busting efforts to get rid of the monopolies. He also fought against J.P. Morgan's Northern Security Company, which had violated the Sherman Antitrust Act. Other laws passed as a result of the Square Deal policy included the Elkins Act, the Hepburn Act, and the expansion of the Interstate Commerce Commission. Although big businesses still held immense power after the Progressive Era, Roosevelt was successful in terminating many monopolies and paving the way for future businesses. Conservation. In terms of conservation, Roosevelt was a pioneer of sustainability in a time when it was the least of people's focuses, and created the National Conservation Commission to help enforce his environmentalist beliefs. He did this through passing several acts, including the Carey, Newland, and Reclamation Acts. The Carey Act of 1894 distributed federal lands to the states under the condition that it be settled and irrigated. The Newland Act of 1902 allowed the government to use money from public land sales to create western irrigation networks. The Reclamation Act of 1902 created arable land in areas that had been too dry to farm through the use of dams and irrigation, and the Reclamation Service eventually brought millions of acres of farmland back into service. Roosevelt also created the National Forest Service in 1905, which established 200 million acres of land as national forests. The National Conservation Commission was established in 1908 to monitor the nation's resources and help manage it more effectively. This included creating an inventory of the nation's resources, better the nation's waterways, and conduct the nation's affairs more sustainably. Consumer protection. Roosevelt also advocated caring for the consumer. Legislation was passed which specified that meat had to be processed safely with proper sanitation. The Meat Inspection Act was created in 1906 as a direct response to the disturbing accounts in the book The Jungle. This initiated federal inspection throughout the meat-making process. The issue became so problematic that even foreign governments threatened to ban all American meat imports due to the sanitation issues found within the American meat factories. Foodstuffs and drugs can no longer be mislabeled, nor could consumers be deliberately misled. The Pure Food and Drug Act of 1906 banned the mislabeling of food and drugs and prohibited the interstate transportation and sale of impure, contaminated food. Overall, the impacts of Roosevelt's Square Deal helped the American public, be it in nature, consumerism, and entrepreneurship, proved to be successful. For conservation, actions such as the creation of the National Conservation Commission and the National Park Service helped to conserve nature for future generations. The Meat Inspection Act and the Pure Food and Drug Act helped to provide safe food processing with proper sanitation requirements when producing products. Finally, the Department of Labor and Commerce helped to enforce vital acts of the federal government that prevented monopolies and allowed other companies and businesses to prosper.